Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And again, thank the witnesses for your testimony today, and more importantly, for what you do every day. Chief Butler, we were just talking a little about urban search and rescue. Back in 2016, you may recall we passed legislation that was worked on in this committee called the National Urban Search and Rescue Response Systems Act, and it enhanced compensation and protections for urban search and rescue teams and required FEMA to finance and replace certain equipment used by those teams. How's that worked? Can you give us a sense of whether the legislation was helpful or not, and what more could be done to improve that legislation? You just mentioned the federal grants funding the USAR system continuing, but can you give us a sense of where we are with regard to implementation of that legislation and what else could be done?
Yes, thank you. So we asked that Congress can appropriate, $50 million for the USAR system in FY 2022. This funding would allow the USAR teams to replace current transportation assets, like you've mentioned, sir, which are nearing the end of their lives. And increased funding also would allow FEMA to conduct 3 or 4 full-scale exercises each year to provide training along with operational readiness. I'll stop there and answer the origin, the genesis of your question. How has it worked so far? It worked well. It has worked well up until to this point. But as we've talked about this morning, the increasing demands and the increase in weather extremes and other needs to deploy USAR teams require that we keep up with the pace and the funding and the infrastructure. So, the USAR teams will be able to improve their capabilities for responding to subterranean incidents like trench or tunnel collapses as somewhat of an emergent threat. And also the USAR teams will be able to validate the use of new technology as unmanned aerial systems or robots. So the IFC recommends increasing the funds for the USAR system to adequately catalog and validate federal and state and tribal and territorial local search teams. So. Great.
Thanks, Chief Butler. I appreciate it. We just celebrated our USAR team locally for the good work that they did down at the most recent hurricanes, but we also had a kind of a sober commemoration of the 20-year anniversary of 9/11, where Ohio Task Force 1, Dayton, Cincinnati area, took off immediately. My wife actually saw them on the highway heading toward New York. She was coming from D.C. and she saw them in Pennsylvania, lights flashing, that morning. And it's a great system. I'm a huge supporter. It's a classic example of state local. There's so much training and so much expertise that FEMA gets essentially for free because you have these firefighters and others, doctors, people with trained dogs and so on, and they do a lot of this just as volunteers and provide so much help and resources on a national level. So the search and rescue teams in every one of our states responds with mutual aid. So I'm a huge supporter, and I think it's, frankly, it's an investment that really pays off. So I thank you for your service, and thanks for what you said today, and we'll follow up with you on your comments. Ms. Merrick, thanks for what you do in Ohio again. One thing you talked about in your testimony I thought was interesting was this safe room rebate program to help prevent Ohioans from needing assistance from an urban search and rescue team, as an example. Can you talk about that and what other ways that individuals and families can better prepare in order to avoid situations that would require rescue?
Yeah, thank you, Senator. Our Safe Room rebate program in Ohio has just been phenomenal. We have over 450 safe rooms that have been put into residential plots of land. And one of the things that we do with that is to ensure that when people build a safe room or they have an in-ground safe room, that they're coordinating with their first responders to let them know like the codes of the geocoding of where it's at. In the event debris would fall on top of that storm shelter, so they would know to go and clear that place first. But otherwise, that's pretty much the response they would have to do. Some of the other ways I think that families could better prepare to avoid these situations would make a plan for all hazards, to include severe weather. Ensure you've included a communication plan. How will you let people know that you're okay? I know recently, during Ida, I had gotten a phone call from a friend of mine who has family down in Louisiana and said, I can't get a hold of them. I don't know if they're okay. I don't know if they have power. I don't know if they got out. So it's important, very important that you have a communications plan and how you'll reconnect or where you'll meet after an event. Know how you'll receive information about those events.
Yeah.
Have alerts active on your phone. Enable them for the wireless emergency alert. Obtain a weather radio, to keep in your house, work, places of worship, and other locations that may have your phones off or silent. Probably the last thing I want to make sure is if you have a safe room, communicate that to your first responders. And this is so important in the community. While first responders, to include our urban search and rescue in Ohio Task Force 1, are trained to look for survivors, if you can facilitate their efforts by letting them know that you have one, they have a chance to save more people because they'll just do a drive by your place to make sure that that's not covered by debris, and then they'll be able to move on.
All good advice. Thank you. And I hope people are listening and will listen to you. Research has shown that $1 of mitigation saves on average $6 on future disaster costs. And we mentioned earlier that the Storm Act is in the bipartisan infrastructure bill that's now before the House of Representatives. But we also have something in there called the Building Resilient Infrastructure and Communities Program, or the BRIC program, B-R-I-C. There's $1 billion for that. How important is mitigation for preparedness, Ms. Merrick, and how has BRIC impacted Ohio?
Well, Senator, the first year of BRIC program, Ohio only received the set-aside amount. Mm-hmm. We, like most of the country, did not receive competitive funding due to some of the technical aspects of the program. Mm-hmm. Assuming passage of a bipartisan infrastructure bill, we will have projects ready to go for the competitive package that we put together for the first year of funding. We'll need to see how those projects fit within the future notice of funding opportunities that come out from FEMA. But of course, we do appreciate having this additional pot of money to be able to tap into. We just have to figure out over the years the best way to be able to do that with some of those technical benchmarks that we need to meet.
Great. Well, my time has expired, but we will follow up with you on some specifics on how to improve BRIC going forward. Hopefully this will pass the House of Representatives even this week, and we'll have that ability for Ohio and other states to apply for those competitive grants. And also we'll follow up with you on the bureaucracy at FEMA and how to reduce some of the costs and inefficiencies and some of the delays that you have experienced. Thank you, Ms. Merrick. Thanks to all witnesses. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.